Good evening, everyone. My name is Nathan Senn. I'm the Festival Director of the Environmental Film Festival Australia, and I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's launch of our Summer of Change Festival and very special In Conversation opening night event. Summer of Change is the second of 4 seasonal programs across 2020 and 2021, and a celebration of all the disruptors, innovators, and visionaries who are currently fighting to protect and preserve the integrity of our environment. We're very proud to be able to feature the film Wild Things as part of our program, a stunning piece of Australian cinema, and are so excited to be able to present tonight's special In Conversation, moderated by the film's director, Sally Ingleton, and featuring climate activist and star of the film, Harriet O'Shea Carre, and youth climate activist and member of SEED, Jacob Peluso. Before we get underway, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we're respectively gathered. For me, that's the Djadjalrung people. It's an honour and a privilege to live and work in a country with such a rich Indigenous history and culture, and I want to pay my respects to all elders past, present, and emerging, and to any First Nations people who may be joining us tonight. Unfortunately, Uncle Dave Wandin from the Wurundjeri Land Council was set to be joining us to welcome us all to country, but he has been slightly delayed, and so hopefully he'll be able to join us and be able to present his very warm welcome at the end of tonight's event. In the meantime, I'd like to continue by thanking all of our major sponsors for this event, particularly Bank Australia, Darebin City Council, and the Canadian High Commission of Australia. Without outstanding organisations such as these, we simply wouldn't be able to present events like Summer of Change. Our entire team are profoundly grateful for the support and the opportunity to collaborate with these organisations, with whom we've been able to curate a lineup of special events across the festival. I'd also like to send a very deep thanks to our brilliant team of volunteers. Forced to work entirely remotely and having just presented our Out of This World program less than 3 months ago, delivering a festival the calibre of Summer of Change is a significant achievement. And so I want to thank everyone involved for all that they've contributed to the festival. I'd especially like to thank our management team, Gabriella Bryden, Luke Forsyth, Freya Gillard, Jennifer McAuliffe, Edwina Landale, Taylor Mitchell, Alexandra Pritchard, and Ashley Sang for all their brilliant work in deftly guiding Summer of Change from its conception through to its delivery tonight. But now on to the festival. With the tremendous devastation caused by bushfires every year, summer in Australia is often a reminder of the ways environmental change can impact us both personally and collectively. Now, we also find ourselves navigating a COVID normal 2021 with much uncertainty remaining around how our world will look as we grapple with the impacts caused by this pandemic. But things will forever be markedly different is a certainty, and it's our hope that in coming together around the medium of film that we can galvanise our community by providing a platform to celebrate those striving to make a real difference. Where with Out of This World, we look to futuristic and imagined worlds to conceive of possible ways forward. With Summer of Change, we hope to shift our focus back to our local environments, to see what lessons can be learned from environmental pioneers and trailblazers, and to explore how the disruption of COVID might be used as a catalyst to spur positive change. We're thrilled to present a program that showcases an incredibly strong lineup of First Nations films that explore themes of resistance. In films like Warrior Women, The Last Ice, and our Elders in the Earth shorts package, we celebrate a multitude of Indigenous leaders who are fighting to ensure that traditional knowledge and custodianship are kept alive in order to heal the planet. There are also films that celebrate action and protest as a powerful means for cultivating change, as demonstrated in Wild Things, which showcases the collective power of youth climate activists who flooded the streets of Australia and the globe to demand that their voices be heard. Finally, there are so many inspiring films that also showcase environmental progress and how reformative action can catalyse important environmental victories. One example of this is a film, That's Wild, which demonstrates the way in which organisations can harness the power of nature to improve the mental well-being of their communities. It's a very eclectic and diverse program that we have on offer for you, and so I really encourage you all to check it out and get involved as much as possible over the next 2 weeks. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Sally, who will formally introduce our Wild Things panel, but first we'll start by showing the film's trailer. On behalf of the entire team, I wish you a wonderful opening night and hope you enjoy the festival and the incredible discussion that's to follow. Thank you very much.
In the end, you've got 2 choices. You lie at the bottom of the hole, or you get up and you fight.
I'm here because I really believe that this mine should not go ahead.
We want to try to make sure that not another tree falls in this forest.
The
people that have been voted into power aren't taking responsibility. If they were taking responsibility, then we wouldn't have to.
What has happened is that there's a great movement of people who now realise that by their own strength they can do something about the environment in which they live.
I wasn't up to it early on, but when I realised that I wasn't speaking for myself, I was speaking for the river, it became easier.
I've lost contact with everybody. It's just horrific not being able to do anything to stop it.
I think it's really easy to feel like you're alone. There's like nothing you can do.
This huge semi-truck came onto us.
This is just the fight that we have to win if we're to have a future for our families.
You know, I'm nearly 80, for God's sake, you know, with grandchildren.
This morning, been awoken by cops and loggers at the gate. They're going to have to come get us. We think that this place is worth taking a stand for.
I'm not ever going to give up in this fight. I'm in this for the long haul.
We will fight this climate emergency and we will win. Would you take the hands of the people on either side of you and lift them in the air so that we can show our politicians and leaders just how strong and powerful we are?
Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to all the streamers out there. Really happy that you can join this live stream event where we're going to be talking about the power of youth environmental activism. The trailer that you saw is a film that that I produced and directed, and yeah, it's called Wild Things. It was made with support from Screen Australia and several other screen agencies, Screen Territory, Film Victoria, Screen Tasmania, and the amazing support of lots and lots of private donors and philanthropic groups. The film is actually releasing in cinemas as of next week, so really you're getting sort of advanced peek look through the Environment Film Festival. So really happy to be sharing it with all of the EFFA mob. As Nathan said, we've got Jacob from Seed Mob and Harriet from School Strike for Climate. Harriet was one of the people who I filmed as part of Wild Things. So we follow her journey getting involved in the School Strike for Climate all the way through 2019. And it was quite a ride, wasn't it, Harriet? Yeah, the film looks at, I guess, three kind of key environmental campaigns that have really gripped Australia in the recent times, and that's the Stop Adani campaign, the fight to defend old growth forests down in Tasmania, and the school strike movement. So we thought we'd talk a little bit about just what it's like as a young person and why you have chosen to get involved in the environment movement. Harriet, would you like to start? What got you involved? What got you motivated to become an environmental activist?
Yeah, I think for me, what inspired me to become involved in environmental activism was really just like my understanding of how privileged I am and how fortunate I am to be in the position that I'm in, and just realizing how disproportionately climate change impacts already like marginalized and disadvantaged people and communities really made me realize that it's not just a choice to be an environmental activism, it's my moral obligation. I think it's really important to use your whatever like voice you have for like the people that really need it. And yeah, I'm not on the front lines of like climate change, and I think it's really important that I use like the privilege that I do have to fight for the people that are really suffering from this, and also I guess to empower I guess young people and all the other types of people that are particularly disadvantaged by climate change, because it is the young people that will be inheriting this planet. So yeah.
Exactly. And when you think of young people inheriting the planet, well, they will, but I suppose, we also have to be very mindful of honouring our ancestors. And Jacob, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the reasons why you decided to join the Seed Mob?
Yeah, so I think for me, I grew up on the Mornington Peninsula, and it's a lot of people who grew up with me will agree with this, but it's sort of a very insular peninsula. Like you sort of go to school and you sort of just know the people who live on the peninsula. It's kind of almost like just a big extended country town in some ways. And I think when I finished school, I was always kind of into environmentalism and very curious about about the environment, climate change, and I sort of felt like I had a bit of a platform to kind of do something about it, so that's what sort of got me into environmental activism. And upon learning about my Indigenous roots, I think that drove me towards Seed Mob, when in fact I had a chance encounter with someone from Seed at a folk festival in New South Wales, and he told me that Seed were I suppose we're looking for more volunteers, and he sort of said what they did and what their goal was, and I sort of just jumped right on board. I sort of realized that was my opportunity to kind of find something in a movement that was way bigger than myself, and that's exactly what I found. So
why do you think it's really important for Indigenous young people to get involved in climate action, and how can you, I suppose, use your experience and your culture to impact the broader issues? What can we learn from Indigenous people?
Yeah, well, Harriet touched on it, but we, young Indigenous people and young people in general are the ones that are going to inherit the earth, and it is Indigenous people who are the most affected by climate change, because unfortunately there's a bit of a gap in who's affected, and unfortunately for Indigenous people, even though we contribute the least to greenhouse emissions, we actually are the ones that are going to be affected the most when the stuff really kind of hits the fan. So I think it's just important to to empower young Indigenous communities, and even in doing so, just by sharing knowledge about the disaster that we face, but more importantly, ensuring that we provide Indigenous communities, rural, remote, or metro, that we provide them with the opportunities where they can help out. So I think that's I feel like it's my obligation, being quite a privileged Aboriginal person, and I think the environmental movement has done a really good job of doing that.
Mm-hmm. So I know, Harriet, you were very involved in the school strike for climate movement. Tell us a little bit about the momentum of that year 2019, when those strikes first started, and maybe share a little bit about your experience of getting involved in the strikes, and how those strikes what it was like to be up there on the stage and talking to literally thousands and thousands of people.
Yeah, well, it was pretty crazy how quickly the movement kind of blew up, and how much happened in like a very short amount of time. Like when Malou, Callum, and I first decided to start striking at late 2018. We really didn't know where it would take us, and where this would go, and if it would be successful in any way, and we just thought like it was worth a try, and we needed to at least do something, at least try our best, and so it was pretty incredible just how quickly we started to see more and more people get involved, and more people paying attention to us. So yeah, it was pretty amazing to be involved in something that became so big, and just to be surrounded by so many people that don't just care about climate action, but are also willing to implement really big changes in their own lives and make really big sacrifices for our planet, and really prepared to take the action that's needed. So it was very inspiring and gave me a lot of hope for the future. I guess I think everyone
was feeling extremely hopeful about just the momentum that was going, with all the, right around the world, everyone was talking about climate change and people were becoming extremely aware of it. And last summer, we had these extraordinary bushfires, right down the east coast of Tasmania, of Australia, that devastated so much natural forest and habitat and wildlife, and then of course people losing property and lives and so forth. And then and then now the last year we've all been impacted by the pandemic. Do you find that the pandemic has changed the way you have continued your activism?
Absolutely. I mean, how could it not? It's changed. It's changed everything. But we've really had to adapt the movement a lot. And yeah, we've really had to learn to be really flexible in how we protest and try really hard to figure out new, tactics and methods, because of course we want everyone to be staying safe during the pandemic. So it was very difficult to navigate that. And it was also just a big struggle kind of going back to feeling a bit disempowered and voiceless, and just trying to figure out how we could still be active in this very different environment, because one of the big pros to being involved in the school strike movement was just how it did give a lot of people like a lot of hope about the future and made people feel a lot less anxious about what was going on in our planet, because action is the best antidote for that anxiety and everything that comes with understanding climate change. So it was very hard to go back again to feeling like I couldn't really do much and feeling a bit
it was really cruel, wasn't it? After such amazing momentum, to then all be sort of having to stay at home and be locked up. Jacob, what about Indigenous young people? Because I know certainly, I spend a certain amount of year up in Darwin in the Northern Territory, and I know there that all the remote communities were really in very, very strict lockdown because there was a real concern that, we didn't want the pandemic to get into remote communities. So that must have been pretty hard for a lot of the young people, especially in the Northern Territory and in remote areas, because I know the Seed Mob have been really, really active in the Northern Territory, particularly around fracking and water rights. Have you heard much about how they've coped with that sort of isolation with COVID?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. So I'm also an Aboriginal youth worker, and I'm in my last year of a public health and sustainability degree. And so at the start of the year, I was working at VACA just as a program coordinator there, and we do a lot with working with young Indigenous people to capacity building and helping them providing them mentorship and stuff and that kind of thing. And there's correlations there, because something that I found was that it was very difficult because obviously we know about the wealth gap that Indigenous Australians experience as opposed compared to non-Indigenous Australians. And what that can sometimes mean is that a lot of Aboriginal people don't actually have access to internet. They don't actually have access to the resources to be involved in a movement, even if it's online. So the COVID pandemic really put a hardship on that kind of thing, because unfortunately for a lot of Indigenous people, they didn't actually have the resources to actually be involved in COVID. And so as it is, it's very difficult to encourage young Aboriginal people to get involved in a lot of ways. But with the pandemic and with and with the lack of ability to work interpersonally with each other on site, that just made it a whole lot harder. And so I think Aboriginal Australia.
I thought that must have been the case, because obviously, in remote Australia, the signal and the internet is often not available, and so it would have been really hard when suddenly all the meetings and everything were being done online. Are people starting to travel again to sort of keep the momentum going, particularly around issues such as fracking and water, which has a really...
With seed, so we've actually, we've gone through a lot of changes very recently, and so, there's going to be a lot more, Indigenous kind of ownership and Indigenous kind of empowerment through seed, whereas previously we worked very closely with AYCC, and so now we've kind of, broken off, and it's very exciting to sort of have that, not starting from scratch, but have that kind of the groundwork that was that was helped by the AYCC and the school strike movement to then hopefully propel us into a strong kind of direction. So
great. Oh well, that sounds really positive. And tell us, what was your first action?
Mine.
Yeah.
Mine. I believe it was a school strike. Maybe it was 2018 or. Yeah, it must have been 2018, but I remember, going to an action and just being kind of overwhelmed with the, with the amount of people that were there. And I was like, okay, this is kind of cool, because like now I know so many other people care and so many other young people care, and that kind of gave me a lot more, just a lot more kind of encouragement to be involved. And so I could be wrong on that, but I believe it was a school strike. So first major one anyway. So
have you been involved in any blockades or protests?
So we've done the Stop the Fracking campaign. So fracking the NT campaign. So we've done lots of blockades in front of the Origin office in Melbourne. And then, unfortunately, I wasn't part of this action, but a lot of my peers were able to. They went up to Parliament House in Canberra in early 2019, and they protested there. And I guess the action went so well that even Leo DiCaprio posted something about it on his Instagram. So there's definitely been a lot of highlights in the last 2 years. So,
oh, that's great. I know that that up in the Northern Territory they did a great action. I think it was in 2019 where they went to the Parliament House in Darwin and they got a digger and they actually dug up the lawn in front of Parliament House.
Wow.
And, to basically say, well, this is your backyard. This is how you feel about getting your backyard dug up. Well, we also don't like getting our backyard dug up for to put in fracking drills. So... And I think they fought that one in court and they got off. So that was good. So I suppose what advice would you give young people that might be watching, or their parents might be watching this live stream? What sort of advice would you give in terms of how to get involved? Like if people are thinking, well, what can I do? What difference can I make? What do you suggest in terms of encouraging young people to get involved in the movement? Harriet, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure, sorry. I feel like it's definitely some people struggle with like knowing how to get involved because, particularly with climate change, like it just impacts people in so many different ways. So there are so many different ways you can help. I feel like it's really important, to know that there are heaps of different like ways of taking action. And like, I think it's really important to have action like on an individual, like personal level, and then also like within your communities, and then also kind of like large scale systemic action. So, I mean, if you're really not knowing where to start, it's always great to start with like your own decisions you make as like a consumer. If you like have the privilege to be able to like change those things, it's really important to kind of be conscious of like what like companies and what products you're supporting, and then I guess also getting involved with like your local politics, and meeting with council members and writing letters and petitions and everything, and of course like coming to protests. Or I don't know, there are so many different ways you can be involved, but I feel like there's something for everyone.
I know that in your community they did declare, I think the council declared a climate emergency, and What has actually happened? What does that mean if a council declares that they're calling a climate emergency? Do you know, like, what sort of actions they've taken?
Yeah, well, I mean, it can mean different things. It will mean different things for every council, I'm sure. But I think for our council, yeah, they're trying to commit to getting like net zero, I think, with like council operations and everything by like 2030. And yeah, so they've made a lot of commitments regarding like our carbon emissions as a town and like trying to do waste projects and everything. But also, I think at the moment, because this is a, you know, very new change, it only happened quite recently, thanks to a lot of like protesting and everything. So at the moment, I don't think they've got everything sorted out, but there are still lots of discussions and stuff about like what exactly, yeah, declaring a climate emergency is going to mean for our town. But yeah, hopefully there'll be some significant changes.
I think at that local level, you know, local councils by and large have been really leading the way when it comes to environmental action. And certainly a lot of local councils, you know, we've got Greens members certainly in the inner city and around Australia. There's quite a strong Greens membership, which is great. Excuse me. And yeah, it's just trying to get that at the state level and then at the federal level as well. So we've got a few questions coming in from our audience. So please, we do want to involve the audience. So please do field some questions. There's a question here to Jacob about January the 26th. What does the Seed Mob recommend that we do to support Indigenous young people and Indigenous businesses on that day? Do you think the day should be changed, given that we're sort of stuck with it at the moment as Australia Day, even though we abhor the history of that day? What do you suggest?
I mean, we obviously think it should be changed, but on the day, you know, I think Seed generally recommends that you go to protests in the city at Parliament House. That's typically what we've done for the last, I believe, 3 years. But also, as well as that, there's lots of Indigenous kind of community services organisations around the city and around the place. So, for example, I used to work at VACA, which is Victorian Aboriginal Childcare Agency. Then you've got BARS, which is Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. So there's lots of organisations like that actually do their own things, and you know, they encourage people to strike. But if you just go onto their website or their Instagram, they can tell you what they're going to do. Sometimes they do big banners. They do you know, big kind of like gatherings of people at the strike. So yeah, just kind of log on to the Instagram of any of those you know, Aboriginal community development organisations, and you'll be able to kind of see what to do to support us and show solidarity. So,
what are your plans for January the 26th? Where will you be, Jacob?
Yeah, I'll be probably right in the middle of that strike at Parliament House. So yeah, I'm sure we'll get a few people you know, from Seed Mob up and going out there. So you know, it's not necessarily something to look forward to, but you know, that camaraderie is definitely something to hold some faith in. So I look forward to that, and you know, seeing some of the mob again. So yeah.
There's an audience question here asking me what I hope to achieve with the film Wild Things. One of the reasons why I really wanted to make the film was I wanted to celebrate, I guess, the importance of environmental activism in Australia. Now I'm getting an echo there for some reason. Oh, well, I'll just keep going. And so I thought the best way of doing that was to show some of the really strong frontline action campaigns that were happening now. And in doing that and in meeting a lot of the activists, you know, it was extraordinary just what a diverse group of people, you know, and people of all ages. Obviously lots of young people, there were students, there were lots of uni students, there were people that were sort of having gap years and so on that would spend time at the Camp Bimby, which was a training camp for non-violent direct action. But there were also lots and lots of professional people, doctors, lawyers, healthcare workers, teachers, electricians, tradies, and a lot of older people, certainly a lot of people who were grandparents and were genuinely really concerned about what a large new coal mine such as the Adani coal mine is going to do to the climate, and not only the climate but our natural world such as the Great Barrier Reef. And so they were there going to the front line and getting involved in these actions and really putting their bodies on the line. And you see some really extraordinary scenes in the film, Wild Things, where people are really putting their lives at risk to get involved in frontline action. And then I also spent time down in Tasmania, as I mentioned earlier, with the people that were defending the forests down there. And, you know, they will, again, it's all non-violent, direct action, so people protest non-violently. And they're learning skills such as how to climb trees, how to sit, set up a tree sit. And in some cases, you know, people will, you know, incredibly organised and really well, just well-intentioned, will, you know, may hold a tree sit for a number of days to protest about why those coops or areas are being logged. And they will literally be standing in front of bulldozers. And it was really powerful to see what would happen when people do protest and then they're putting themselves up to be arrested. And often the police coming in, you could tell there was a kind of an empathy with what the protesters were trying to achieve. And in many cases, they were successful. I mean, they did stop those coops from being logged. And I think if you look at the history of non-violent protest in Australia, you know, there have been amazing achievements. You know, probably the largest celebration or the largest incident is the Franklin River and the big actions that happened in 1982, 83, where an enormous blockade was set up on the wild Franklin River, and every day there were actions. You know, thousands of people went to that blockade. They sort of braved the mud and the wild weather and so on to go to that blockade. But they stopped that dam from being built. And there's stories like that right around Australia where rainforests have been saved. And in the Northern Territory, there was a blockade that went for 9 months to stop a uranium mine from being built in Kakadu. So frontline action does really work. And I think often the general public think that it's a waste of time and that people who do protest are troublemakers and dole bludgers. And I suppose for me, you know, I really hope that the film will go a long way to change that view and to give, I suppose, people an understanding, an immersive understanding of what it's like to be a frontline protester and the reasons why people do that. So we hope, you know, the film will be rolling out in cinemas as of next week, and we will, you know, we're planning to get it into schools and developing educational resources to accompany the film. So we really hope it'll have a decent impact. What Harriet, you were in the film. What did you how did you find the experience of being filmed?
The beginning and everything, but I think I got used to it pretty quickly, and it was great to have someone that I trusted like you, Sally, filming, because it's definitely really good experience and practice for when you're talking to media and everything with cameras, and you obviously don't have nearly as much control over what's going to be presented to the rest of the world. So it was really great to work with someone that I trusted to give a really good representation of like our movement. And also it's just been so interesting to see like my own kind of like journey and how much kind of my own understanding of like climate change and climate activism and justice and everything has changed over this time. Just like seeing the movie, it's a strange reminder of just how much has changed. Just in like the way I see this, I don't know, climate activism, and everything. So it's pretty a pretty unique opportunity to just be able to like reflect on that. Yeah.
Good. Well, we've got a few more questions coming in here. How do your parents or guardians respond to your activism? Well, I guess, Jacob, what do your parents think of you getting involved with Seed Mob?
Look, my mom's a third wave feminist, so she's fully supportive, eh? So like, yeah, you know, she was quite prominent in the women's rights movement in the 80s in Australia. So I think, you know, any form of activism, she's all for it. So my dad's a bit more kind of conservative in the way that he thinks about it, you know. So, but you know, at the end of the day, it's, you know, they're just happy for me to be happy. So, you know, they're stoked with it. You know, as long as I'm believing in something, they're stoked. So that's kind of that's their thoughts.
And what about you, Harriet? Because you got involved, you know, when you're only 14. What did your parents think when you first started striking from school?
Well, when I initially told them that I wanted to go on school strike for climate action, they were a bit confused and didn't really see the connection between like school and climate change. They were like, why would you skip school for that though? Like, what's the point? Just like do it on a weekend. But yeah, they came around like pretty quickly. Yeah, they're definitely like empathetic for the cause. And yeah, now they're really supportive. I think it's really important. I mean, yeah, just initially they were kind of like, what? Because they definitely, you know, value my education a lot and didn't want me to have to make that sacrifice. But in the end, they, I think, would prefer me uneducated than dead. So, yeah.
Well, I think your parents, I've obviously got to know your parents a little bit because of, you know, making the film, and I've obviously, you know, run everything past them, and, you know, they're wonderful people, and they're very, very proud of you and very supportive of the work that you've been doing. And I think quite surprised really at how the whole thing just took off. And they really have supported you, you know, all along. And your dad kind of, because for a long time you didn't have a phone, so your dad kind of became your personal press secretary, didn't he? He was constantly fielding calls and press.
Yeah, I mean, he
requests.
still is. I never check anything. And Dad's always like, Harriet, you've got to do this thing. They've been emailing you for weeks, and I'm like, oh.
Oh, good. So I'm just looking at another. So there's a question here about arrests. Now, Harriet, you recently got arrested. How was that? Do you want to tell us a little bit about what were the circumstances that led to you getting arrested?
Yeah, well, like, was it about a month ago or something?
Before Christmas, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah. I went up to Tasmania for the premiering of Wild Things there, and I got to meet some of the other activists involved in the film. So I decided to change my ticket and stay for another like 2 weeks in Tassie so that I could do some direct action with them in the native forest. Yeah, so that was like my first experience of direct action, and I locked onto a logging machine in one of the forests in an area that was critical like habitat for the swift parrots, which are critically endangered species. There's only about like 300 left. And yeah, they're still being pushed into extinction by this logging. And also just so many other species are also in danger because of this, and these forests are just amazing places. So yeah, I locked onto one of the machines with Bob Brown, which was pretty cool. And yeah, had my first arrest and everything, which was a very I guess like educational experience. I learned a lot about like direct action. And yeah, but it was also quite sad just to see that the impact that logging can have on like the environment. It was quite like tragic, and just feeling like the difference in temperature just between, you know, the logged areas and the areas that still have the forest was pretty crazy.
And when so you got arrested, what were you charged with?
I'm actually a bit confused because the police were quite, the police officers were a little bit incompetent. And when they found out I was still a child, they didn't really know what to do with me. So they gave me they didn't really give me much information. So I still don't really know what's happening, and what's gonna end up on my record and everything. I'm still quite in the dark at the moment, but hopefully at some point
probably should find out.
Figure it out. Yeah.
Find out.
Yeah.
What I mean, I presume that you might have been charged with either trespassing because you were on land that was, supposedly a logging company had a contract to do the logging there, and then maybe resisting police orders.
I think they said they wouldn't give me obstruction of a police officer, so it should just be trespassing. Yeah.
Most of the protesters, they usually end up with a fine, and obviously they do add up. So it's not ideal, and it's ridiculous, really, that it's come to this where you have to go and lock onto equipment or to protect these wonderful trees. It's a really crazy situation to be in. What about you, Jacob? Have you ever been arrested?
No, not the movement. Not necessarily in the movement. So it's kind of, my thoughts on this are, quite interesting and sometimes quite, inflammatory. But I used to give the belief, a couple of years ago that I was very against people going out to lock onto trees to, get arrested. But I see a place for it now. When I was a bit younger, 21, 22, I used to kind of be of the assumption that it would just put a bad stigma on the movement. And so I was I never was willing to do it for that reason, because I was like, well, at the end of the day, we're trying to empower Indigenous people. Indigenous people get a bad rap as it is with arrests and incarceration. And if we've got, privileged people going out to get arrested, it's just going to probably reflect badly on Indigenous people who care for climate. So I was kind of that thought for a little while, but now, I seem to, I seem to understand the reason why people are willing to get arrested for the movement. I think that the laws surrounding, trespassing are often kind of shit, to be honest, and I don't believe that people should get fined for standing up for activism and standing up for climate change, because I believe that, at the end of the day, our grandchildren and even us are the ones that are going to be suffering if nothing does get done about it. So I can completely see now why people are willing to, to do such a thing. So, but my experience is, I've been a poor uni student for the last couple of years, so I've never been willing to, to pay a fine for that kind of thing. But, if people want to do it, then all power to them. So that's kind of, my thoughts on that. There's definitely a place for it. So.
Look, certainly from the people that I've spoken to, I mean, nobody really wants to be arrested, but they want to stand their ground, and they're firm in their belief, and they don't want to just kowtow to a law that basically isn't right. And in the film, one of the activists says, just because it's the law, it doesn't mean that it's right. And I think that's so true. And I mean, you just only have to look back into history and, the number of times where people have protested and done things that might have been against the law. But when you look back, you think, well, they did the right thing. I mean, one of the greatest images of protest that I always remember is, and it's probably before both of you were born, but there was a big demonstration uprising in China in 1989, Tiananmen Square, and that incredible image of that young Chinese man walking in front of the tank, and basically every time the tank tried to move, he would move, and eventually the tank just stopped because it sort of didn't want to go over him. But it was an amazingly courageous act of that young man, and those pictures that were recorded at the time, extraordinary. Let's see if we've got any more questions here. What can adults do to support youth activism without taking up space and getting in the way? What do you reckon? Do adults get in the way, Jacob?
No, you know what? My belief is that adults are the ones that have the money, so it's kind of that helps. That does actually help us a lot. Resources with we're able to fly. We're able to get people like Harriet down to Melbourne, down to Naarm, to do her thing, and that all comes from donors. And so I think that there's definitely a space for adults in the movement. You can never be too old to be an activist. So just look at David Suzuki. So. Yeah, you can never be too old to be an activist, in my opinion.
What about you, Harriet? What do you think? How can adults help young people to speak their truth?
Yeah, well, I mean, I completely agree. I think there's a place for everyone in this movement, because ultimately everyone will be affected by climate change, even though it's to massively varying degrees. And it's really important to have as many different people involved as we can. I guess in terms of how can adults be involved without like overpowering and stuff, I do think it is important, particularly I guess in the school strike movement. It's very important that it is particularly young people that are having their voices empowered, but there's always a place for different people in the background and everything. And we always want more people, and whoever we can get, there are heaps of ways for adults to be involved.
Well, certainly as an adult, I think the actions of young people around climate change have really inspired many adults to get back involved, and a lot of those adults might have been involved when they were younger and they've just sort of got sidetracked and with raising families and work and so on. But I think seeing the energy and the belief from young people has really encouraged lots and lots of older people to get active again. And that's certainly, very much the message of Wild Things is, don't get depressed, get active, as Bob Brown always says. And we want to believe that each one of us can make a difference but you've got to get involved. You can't make a difference just sitting worrying at home and getting depressed and anxious about what's going on in the planet. You need to get out there, join a group, and there's so many young groups that are available, such as Seed Mob for Indigenous people. The Australian Youth Climate Coalition is available for anyone under 30 to join, and there's a fantastic group of young people involved in that. And there's so many opportunities now through social media too, to get online, to sort of join some groups and then, start meeting up with people, even if it is initially just online. There's lots and lots of ways to get active and to make a difference. Closing comments. Harriet, what are your plans for this year? Have you got any plans to be active this year? Are you going to go back to Tasmania, or have you got anything locally that you're going to get involved in?
Well, I mean, I think one thing I've learned from COVID is not to get too set on my plans because it's probably easier just to go with the flow because it's just so unpredictable at the moment, what's going to be able to end up happening. But I feel like I'm hoping to be able to go up to Tassie again at some point and spend some more time with the activists there. I mean, I don't have any very specific plans. I'm just winging it, I guess. But I'll definitely find something to do.
Tell us a little bit about Lisa, who's in the film, who's one of the main protagonists in the film along with yourself. What did you think of Lisa? When you first met Lisa?
She's incredible. She's such an amazing activist and just so good at including and teaching other people. I mean, she's amazing at what she does, and she's such a good she's such an inspiration. She's half the time here doing activist stuff for the forest, and the other half she's off in the Congo doing Doctors Without Borders and everything. So she's a pretty generous person, and yes, very, I don't know, very inspiring. Yeah.
Yeah, so Lisa Searle, if you saw the trailer at the beginning, Lisa is one of the key characters in the film, and she's a doctor, a GP, and she spends a lot of time defending the forest. She's been doing that for the last 12 years, but she is also a GP and works sort of half the year for Médecins Sans Frontières, often running hospitals with very disadvantaged people in Central Africa, and, where she's really seen the first results of the impacts of climate change there. And Jacob, what about you? What are your plans for this year?
Yeah, well, I was supposed to travel for 10 months in 2020 and that didn't happen. So Tasmania, I think, might be the go. I know a couple people down there who are pretty involved in activism, especially in the Tarkine. So
right, get down to the blockade.
Yeah, that's it. So I think it's me and my partner might go down for 4 or 5 weeks and see what we can conjure up. There's couple of amazing activists down there. So, the Jam Graham, who's just an Indigenous warrior, and then, there's obviously so many others. So, we're going to get down there hopefully, and join in on the old fun, eh?
Fantastic. Well, certainly, I think blockades are, they're an amazing opportunity for people to learn about nonviolent action, to get together with like-minded people, and I think people have made really firm friends on these blockades and by being involved in the environment movement. I mean, the people that I met who we filmed as part of the film, who tell the story of the Franklin River blockade, which is nearly 40 years ago now, a lot of those people are still best of friends. And, they've found really strong friendships through being involved in the environment movement. So it is a really wonderful thing to do. It's something that people are passionate about, and it's something that's bigger than your own individual anxieties. So there's nothing better than getting out there and doing something to save our planet. We've got 5 minutes left. Any more questions from our audience out there? One thing that I do want to do is I want to thank Bank Australia, who've been the major sponsor of the Environment Film Festival Australia. This is the first time that EFFA has gone online. So far the tickets have been selling really well. People are really excited to be able to view the films. Sometimes they can sit down with their friends and view from home, and there's a really great range of films that are being screened as part of this summer of change. So I really encourage you all to check out the website and see what's there. Certainly unbiased, please buy a ticket to watch Wild Things, and you'll get to see Harriet and hear all about her story, and Lisa, and hear about these incredible campaigns that have been running. How are we going for time, Freya? Would you like to wrap up? Well, I think we're going to sign off now. So look, lovely to have you all joining us. I hope you enjoyed our live stream. Please check out the website for EFFA and buy some tickets to see some of these incredible films about the environment. Thanks very much, Harriet.